Buongiorno a tutte e a tutti e ben ritrovati a questa serie di iniziative collettive e dialoghi aperti sul futuro delle nostre città a seguito della pandemia di coronavirus. Una serie di eventi a cura del laboratorio di ricerca CITER del Dipartimento di Architettura dell'Università degli Studi di Ferrara. Io mi chiamo Elena Dorato, sono un architetto, sono ricercatrice in urbanistica a Unife e sono anche docente a contratto di progettazione urbanistica al laboratorio del terzo anno. Oggi avrò il piacere di dialogare, di intervistare Renè Kural, architetto danese di Copenaghen, professore di progettazione architettonica e urbanistica alla Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts di Copenaghen, la scuola di architettura, design e restauro, nonché direttore, presidente della rete di ricerca internazionale Active Cities Network, di cui il nostro laboratorio di ricerca è partner. Ringraziamo quindi Renè Kural per la sua disponibilità per dialogare oggi con noi e passiamo ora all'inglese, l'intervista si terrà in lingua inglese. Hi Renè and welcome. Thank you very much for participating to this online event, to this short interview on a broader collective reflection on the future of our cities. So we're going to jump right into it and we're going to start with our short interview. And I'm going to go with you with the first question. So nowadays, many experts from different fields have tried to explain the origins and nature of this COVID-19 virus. However, the explanations haven't always been precise or consistent, and several possibilities and speculations are still emerging. So, however, what appears clear is the existing correlation between the nature of this virus and the environmental crisis that our planet and, of course, our cities and our urban settlements are facing and undergoing. So, what are your thoughts about this preliminary condition?
Well, as I see it from my chair, there's actually nothing new about diseases and disasters having shut down entire nations and, of course, cities. Actually, when we had the plague which ravaged Europe in the 1300s, the authorities also tried to prevent the disease from spreading by isolating people in their home. Or you could say that if they had a home, because it was not everybody who had actually a home. So there are stories that servants were being sent to the street if they got the plague. And last time the plague hit DK was in 1711. And since then you can see that this kind of pandemics, they can actually, they always hit socially unequal, which is quite interesting. I even think that this pandemic, the COVID-19, hits socially unequal. But since I heard your question, I've actually been thinking that in my world, I think terrorism is much worse than the COVID-19. And that is because, that's what I think, that what we have experienced in 9/11 in 2000, it's much worse because it's actually, it hits when you least expect it. It hits towards innocent people in a cowardly way. And for me, actually, a bomb explosion, or actually two bombs, we had in Boston in 2013. It was a major event. It was a marathon. It was a tremendous attack on the rights of you and me and of everybody to gather together with people you don't know and being active. It was a blow right in the stomach of all of us. So for me, terrorism is actually much worse because you can't control it.
Right. Thank you for this question. Following up, so the way you said it yourself right now, that this pandemic and as many other events all often strike the frailer population. So there is inequality, a great social inequality in the ways that also this virus has spread. And we know that the way that people live in cities nowadays cannot be generalized. So there are about 8 billion people living on this planet now. And all over the world, we can find very different housing and urban conditions, which not always allow to maintain the so-called social distances that we're now asked to keep. So from this point of view, Denmark, as we said at the beginning, you live and teach in Copenhagen. Denmark is perhaps an advantaged nation with a quite low population density. How do you believe that this specific feature of your country and of Copenhagen, of the capital city, as well as other structural features and conditions, helped you against this virus?
Actually, I don't really agree with you that we have a very low density, because we are approximately 132 persons per square kilometer. In Italy, you're 191. But the question is quite good, because if we look at Sweden and Norway, countries that we always compare ourselves to, there are only 25 per square kilometer in Sweden and 14 in Norway. And Sweden has been hit, I mean, almost as hard as you have been in Italy, in the United States, and in Spain. So I think the answer to the question is that it was actually a very determined government, that they shut down Denmark immediately. And that's why we, at the moment, we have no new deaths for 3 days from COVID-19. So they simply shut down the country immediately. While in Sweden, we know that they kept the borders open. The restaurants, everything was still open and is still open. And they actually experienced 10 times as many deaths as we do in Denmark. And we just have a small strait between Sweden and Denmark. So they actually, they went with what they call collective immunity strategy, but it failed. They were hoping that if people could survive the first time they were infected by the COVID-19, then they will also be able to survive the second wave or the third wave, etc. But as I see it, they failed, totally failed. So it's a little bit crazy. I think the question is quite good, but we should ask the Swedes. I mean, you have so much space, and they have a lot. You must remember, in Denmark, most of us actually live in the major cities: Copenhagen, Aarhus, Odense, and Aalborg. So it's actually a lot of people in Copenhagen. But when we were out, we managed to keep the 2 meters distance to the guy in front of us or behind us. So I think we are very we do what the politicians tells us sometimes.
So we introduced the city of Copenhagen and its policies, let's say. So when thinking of Copenhagen, we usually visualize it as the city of bicycles. So with the number of bicycles crowding the streets, as a result of very virtuous, we could say, and far-sighted urban policies that have been carried out throughout the last 60 years, at least, in the city of Copenhagen, promoting active mobility instead of private car use. So, as happened after other crises in the past, this pandemic is, of course, also highlighting the potential benefits of removing cars from our cityscapes, not only in terms of environmental impact, in terms of air and noise pollution, but also in terms of physical space. We are going to be needing more space for people, also because of the social distancing rules that we're going to be required to follow for the next few months at least. So cars take up a lot of the city space. Do you actually believe that in this perspective we might be in a way, able to learn a lesson from this emergency, or do you think we'll go right back to the uses of fossil fuels and non-renewable energy in the ways that we did this before, which is what China is apparently doing, from the latest data that we are getting in these days? And how is especially the city of Copenhagen addressing this issue, since you've been one of the first pioneering cities to push for active mobility already in the 1960s?
It's hard to say, but what we know is that the Danish government want to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide with 70% in 2030. We have 10 more years. And when it comes to the city of Copenhagen, the politicians want to decrease the carbon dioxide with 40% until 2025. That means that the political will is there. So I don't think that they will not stick to their policies. I think that we will see that they will try to reach the goals. Maybe not in 2030, but in 2032 or 35. But I think we will reach the goals. And Copenhagen is striving for being the first CO2 neutral city in the world in 2025. And I still think they have promised the population that they will reach the goal. So what I think we will see is that they will continue to have a more livable city in Copenhagen. I think they will continue to pursue their goals. So we might continue what we have been doing wrong for so many years, to go by car, etc. But what we can see is that they are really doing quite many attempts, and quite good attempts, to get people up on the bike or into the metro or walking or jogging, etc. So even I'm not a social democrat, I think we have some very good politicians at the town hall of Copenhagen. So in a way, I think to begin with, we will continue the way that what we did just half a year ago, but I think we will go the right direction.
So let's hope that we will follow, in a way. All right. So we said at the beginning that you are an architect and professor at the Royal Danish Academy of Finance of Copenhagen, but you are also, we might say, an expert in Japanese culture. You work regularly in Tokyo. You bring your students to Japan every year. So the extremely dense and populated Japanese cities that in a way display some similarities to the Italian case, especially for the great number of senior population that we have. So the shape of our age pyramids, we can say, that has made such an impact in the account of the deaths for the coronavirus. So the extremely dense and populated Japanese cities are currently experiencing some very different paths and complex issues in comparison to what you were just saying about Copenhagen and Denmark. So I'm interested of knowing which would be your point of view on a broader level about it.
You see, when I went to Japan 25 years ago for the first time, I read a lot of articles, and in the articles they showed images of people wearing masks. And the text said that's because the pollution of, let's say, Tokyo or Osaka is so high that people have to wear masks. And the truth is, no, it was not. They were not polluted. Not more than, I would say, less polluted than cities like London or Madrid. In London, I think you might have tasted this bitterness of the carbon dioxide on your tongue. It's really, really heavy. But that's not the case for Tokyo. The reason why they wear the mask is that if they know that they are sick, they have the flu or they have a cold, they try to protect their fellow citizens by wearing a mask. That's why that if you interpret what you have seen on the television, that everybody is wearing a mask because blah, 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 they are very good at taking care of each other. No, they have been used to it for centuries, that you always take care of your fellow citizen if you feel sick. So for the Japanese, it was no problem. Nobody had to ask them to do so. So to round up your question, I just read a book today called, it was written by a very famous Danish writer, Klaus Rifbjerg, and it's in Danish, so I'll just translate roughly, that it's called something like Japanese Glimpses. And the photographer in this book as well tries to portray the Japanese city as a place with smog and heavy industries, etc. And it's not the truth, at least not now. It's very, I would say, very clean. And I always refer to the Japanese. I have been living in Japan for 5 years totally, so I know the city. And I always refer to it, Tokyo, for instance, as one of the most humanistic cities on earth, because it has all scales. It's safe. It's not polluted. They strive at not, dirtying their own nest. Keep it clean. If you walk in the streets of Tokyo, there's never a piece of paper on the street. There are not the empty boxes of pizza. So somehow in their upbringing that they take care of each other, and that. So I have a very firm belief that the Japanese city will definitely survive in a very good manner, much better than, for instance, New York or Milan, probably, yes,
Right.
where the pollution is very heavy.
So we should learn a lesson from the Japanese population and take better care of each other and of our environment, right? Okay, so coming to the last question of our short interview. During this past week, at least in Italy, there has been a number of starchitects, as we can call them today, releasing a bunch of interviews, expressing their own vision of how our cities should be or will be after this pandemic. There have been those who have called to a return to the countryside, so the abandon of the urban dimension, the return to a non-urban dimension of living, which is quite impossible to think of these days. Those who support the idea of the city at 15 minutes, much like the mayor of Paris proposed at the end of 2019. Those who have argued that it's an issue of where we live, of urban dwellings, so that people should live in houses larger than 60 square meters from now on, which is also an unthinkable condition for the great majority of the urban population, not just in Europe, but I would say in the world. So if you were asked the same question, if you were asked to give a first and fundamental concept on which we should focus on in order to rethink our cities after this pandemic, what would it be?
Bottom line, it's to continue the densification of our cities. I can't see any reason for not continuing down that road. And there is a lot of evidence, scientific evidence, showing that the places where people are most active, physically active, are in the most dense cities. There is a study from the Lancet which concluded that it was Hong Kong, which was the city out of the 14 cities, I think, worldwide, that where people were the most physical active among those cities. And my own research from 3 European cities, Manchester, Stuttgart in Germany, and Manchester in the UK and in Denmark, shows that they all went down that road. It was densification, but it was in a different way. So you can do it in different ways. In Copenhagen, it was to make new housing areas directly almost in the city center in Ørestad to the south, in Nordhavn in the north, the Carlsberg city to the west. And we are continuing to do that. We are building a whole new artificial island in the next 10 years to move people back to Copenhagen. In Stuttgart, they did it by making a very faster train line, so they could go very fast to Paris. So Stuttgart calls themselves, I think it's Das Herz des Europa, the European heart, the new heart of Europe. And Manchester, they did it in a very I would say, brave way. They tried to boost the city through sports. They have world brands in soccer. Manchester City, Manchester United. They have a whole city. They have one of the best bicycle tracks in the world. They have the whole city development was based on big events, and they somehow succeeded. So the point is, I don't believe that we should have housing of a certain size. I don't believe that we should de-urbanize. I believe in urbanization, definitely.
Well, thank you very much for your answers and for being with us, Renè Kural. Thanks again, and hopefully we will meet each other soon again, not just virtually, but in person. So thank you again.